All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the State of the Angular Ecosystem, your opportunity to hear from core contributors, library authors, and more about various frameworks within the Angular ecosystem. We'll be talking about the things that have happened in 2021, the things that you can look forward to in 2022, and just answer any of the questions that you have about these libraries or just being a library author in specific. But first, before we start, we want to thank our sponsors. So the first of our sponsors is This.Labs. This.Labs is a primarily front-end, primarily JavaScript software consultancy. If this is something that interests you, please feel free to reach out at hi@this.co. As well as one of our sponsors is the Angular team itself, who is so gracious to support events like this and allow us as a community to get together and have these opportunities to share in the interesting developments in the libraries and in the framework that many of us use, or hopefully some of us are thinking about using in the future. We also want to give an update for some of the upcoming events that are going on. So if you're watching this and this is your first time, welcome, first of all. But if this is your first time, we do host a lot of other events that are like this. So upcoming on December 14th, we have our State of React. So come and see what updates are happening in that ecosystem and in that environment as well. We also have our monthly Mentoring Women in Tech meetup that happens on December 15th. This is an event that I am particularly proud about that we host. This is one that is not recorded, not available in any other format, so you have to attend live. It is an absolutely awesome opportunity for any women in tech, people that are prospective or joining, or people that have been in the industry for a long time. That's definitely something to check out. As well as our State of Headless CMS Systems on January 25th. So coming in after the holidays, these are things to look out for if you enjoy this event and you want more of it. As for your host, my name is Rob Ocel. I'm a team lead and software architect at This.Labs, currently working on a couple Angular projects and certainly have been doing it since the AngularJS days, and was at NGConf in 2016, the year that they were really kicking off Angular 2. So I've been a proud user for many, many years at this point. And as for our panelists, today we have Ben Lesh joining us from the RxJS core team. We have Mark Whitfeld from Stackblitz. Brandon Roberts is doing double duty, so he gets 2 paychecks today, representing Nrwl from Nx and as well as Ngrx. We have James Daniel representing Firebase, and then Minko and Jessica representing the Angular team itself. So without further ado, I think we are going to get started, and we're going to start by just going around to all of our different panelists and giving them an opportunity to introduce themselves, talk about any updates from their libraries or the teams that they're representing, and really kind of give us an introduction to the topic. So why don't we start with Ben?
All right. Well, I'm Ben. You already introduced me, so that's solid. I'm not going to do that again. Although I am going to do it again because it's probably my next slide. So there it is. I'm Ben Lesh. I'm the lead on the RxJS project. Recently, I just left Citadel. Before that, I was at Google on the Angular team, and before that, I was at Netflix. So the big thing that I want to draw to people's attention, I know it's been out for a while, and most people should know this, but if just in case you didn't know this, switching from RxJS 6 to RxJS 7 will yield tremendous benefits as far as the size of like how much Rx is in your bundle. So if you were to include everything, the kitchen sink, RxJS 7 is almost half the size of RxJS 6. We have plans to make it even lighter by RxJS 8, which is going to be the time when we finally remove some of the things that have been deprecated for years now. So don't use deprecated APIs if you can avoid it. That's always a good idea. The big thing with version 7 is it had a lot of typing fixes and updates, but it does require TypeScript, or latest version of TypeScript, so TypeScript 4.2 or higher. So you'll start to see you might even see some errors pop up when you update, because it'll start actually catching issues with the types that you're flowing through. Things that have been improved. So as of 7.2, we added top-level exports. So at this point, you can import all of the operators because there's no conflicts anymore from RxJS directly and not from RxJS/operators. So there's merge with instead of merge for the operator. There's concat with instead of concat for the operator brand. And that makes it so we've got everything at the top. We're still not doing that with our Ajax or our fetch or our WebSocket implementation, but those are kind of edge casey. And maybe at some point we'll try to move those to their own package. Another thing that has happened in RxJS 7 that I want a lot of people to know about is multicasting has been simplified. There were roughly, I think, 10 or maybe 12 different operators before and methods before for multicasting. And now we've narrowed it down to really like 3. And the biggest one is the one that people are already familiar with is share. And now share is configurable. So what you're seeing in front of you right now is exactly the equivalent of the current share replay. If you were to use default share replay, this is implemented with share. Now share replay still exists. We didn't remove anything yet. But as you can see, this is much more explicit. Like you can look at it and it's not magic what's happening because you can see the configuration in front of you. You're connecting through a replay subject that's set up in a certain way. That resets that connection if everything is if anything is errored, but it doesn't reset if the source completes or if the ref count goes to 0. So you can control all of that with share, and you can obviously pump through other types of subjects that will default to a regular subject and so on. Another one that we have is sometimes people used to use like publish or multicast or something to make a connectable observable for various reasons. It's not very common, but there were typings issues with that being an operator because it would return a connectable observable and then you had to cast it, and that was kind of annoying. So now we have a regular function that you can convert any source to a connectable observable. It has defaults of defaulting to a regular subject, but you can customize it with configuration. Also new as of, I think, 7.3, we've improved the ergonomics around retrying. So a lot of times people would want to do things like they want to retry and reset. We always had reset on success. And what that means is if it gets a value through, then it's like, oh, I know I can reset at this point. But you can control more. Like in this case, we've added a delay. So you can add a delay of 2000 milliseconds and it'll delay the retry by 2 seconds. You can also do a lot fancier stuff. You can provide a function that you can return any observable input from. And as soon as that observable that you return emits one time, it'll be like, okay, I'm going to retry at that point. So you can do things like here, you've got an exponential back off. And just to show you what you would have had to do this exact same thing with retry when, because people are like, what about retry when? Honestly, this is probably long-term going to replace retry when. This is what you would have had to do with retry when. It's tiny because I had to fit it in there, but it would have been fairly involved in order to get that to work the same way. Another new addition in version 7, as of 7.0, we have animation frames. So no one needs to know a secret sauce recipe for like interval of 0 and use the animation frame scheduler or whatever in order to get animation frames. And this one actually will give you the time elapsed since it started. It'll also give you the high precision timestamp, which comes from, in this case, Performance Now. So it's super interesting and fun to play with. I've got various demos. It doesn't look like this demo is going to play over StreamYard's thing, unfortunately. So there's a view on Stackblitz thing here. I have to report the bug to StreamYard, but imagine things moving around. So you can do a lot of interesting things with the animation frames. It actually works really interestingly well with async pipe and that sort of thing. So check out the slides when I post them. You can try it out. There's new features to tap. And this is something that people were asking for a really long time. Like that people are like, oh, I want to know when someone subscribed to the observable, or I want an event when someone unsubscribes, and only when they unsubscribe, not if it completes or errors. I want, why can't I do finalize inside of tap? So the biggest ones are probably the addition of subscribe and unsubscribe, especially unsubscribe. So you can know specifically when someone unsubscribes, not when it completes or errors. Those are different events that we already had. And then of course, finalize behaves exactly like the finalize operator, but it was an easy add, and it makes sense to kind of complete the features of Tap. Another thing that we now support in version 7 is async iterable. So you can make an async iterable yourself with this async generator function. There's not really a lot of compelling use cases to do this yet. There's some around maybe streaming from fetch or something like that I've actually done. But the bottom line is you can get any async iterable and you can pass it to from or any API that accepts observable inside of Rx. So for example, I can use defer and literally just pass it this async generator function and make like a ticker or whatever. I can yield things and it'll come out of my observable because it will convert that automatically. You can also return these things inside of operators like switch map or concat map or whatever. You can see I'm using an async generator function directly. And sometimes I show people this and they're like, whoa, I thought you had to return an observable in there. And I tell them, nope, you could always return anything you can convert to an observable inside of these. Any API in RxJS that accepts an observable as a return will accept promises and iterables and arrays. And now they also accept async iterables. So there's tons of great new stuff that's come out in the last several months. I really recommend, at the very least, getting on version 7 so you can get that size decrease in your bundles and benefit from all the new type information. We're still supporting 6, and we've got bug fixes there. Sporadically, there aren't too many bugs to deal with, but version 7 is the place to be if you like to use Rx. Another thing that I looked at just recently because I was doing some other research is I saw that RxJS is now up over 30 million downloads a week, which is crazy. And I was kind of wondering why that happened or what correlates with it. And there could be a variety of things, other important libraries picking it up. But right around the introduction of pipables and that sort of thing, I saw a lot of the community starting to create their own libraries to do things with RxJS or make their own pipeable operators, whatever. So I kind of marked those points in the timeline here, but it is interesting to see like how quickly things have grown recently, and I just wanted to share that. So thanks. That's all I've got for RxJS updates.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Next up from our introductions is Mark.
Yeah, hi everyone. I apologize if I'm going to speak a little bit slowly or anything like that, but I was up at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock this morning finalizing a release. And that was the release of the latest version of Stackblitz that supports Angular 13. It has been quite a long road. We've had lots of help from the Angular team. The whole shift from the old style of node projects to MJS files and the new package JSON exports and all that sort of stuff threw us for a bit of a loop. So when I speak about Stackblitz there, I'm speaking about Stackblitz V1. So that's the Stackblitz that you're used to when you go to doc site and you follow a link, and next thing you're playing around in code and it just works. Now, there was a version of Stackblitz that we didn't have to do anything for in the upgrade to Angular 13, and that is Stackblitz Web Containers. So if you haven't heard of it before, it is one of the most impressive pieces of technology I've ever seen. I'm very privileged to be working with the smart people working on that and building that technology. But basically, it's bringing a Node.js runtime into the browser. It's an environment that supports any of the public APIs of Node.js. And as a comparison between V1 and what we call V2 web containers of Stackblitz, is that in V1 we very much know the intimate details about any framework that we support, and we have lots of custom code making sure that it all works nicely and comes up really fast. Stackblitz V2 web containers, it's this compatible environment. So there's no custom code to support any particular libraries or projects. in that case. As long as we have implemented the APIs that they are using out of the standard node APIs, then it is supported. There are some arbitrary APIs that maybe your library might use that potentially isn't implemented yet. So please get a hold of the team. But I don't think you're here to watch me talk, so I thought I'd show a demo. I haven't practiced this before. I actually just brought this up virtually 10 seconds before I spoke. So let's hope that this goes well. Can we bring up this? So this is an awesome picture that I didn't make. Somebody else that we know, what's his name? Oh, that guy, Brandon Roberts. Yeah, this is one of his blog posts. So I just wanted to show you what I'm talking about here. So he's talking about Nx working inside Stackblitz. So I'll go through. I've read this article. Maybe you need to read it. But I'll follow this link here. So this is quite amazing. So it looks like I've opened up VS Code. No, wait. There's something different going on here. What is this? Okay, it did a whole lot of things automatically. Okay, this is Nx running. Where is this running? Let's just see. Oh wow, look at this. This is a browser tab. And I have a terminal here and I'm running Nx and there's a file system going on here. This is quite impressive. So so apparently this Nx tool is great. If you haven't used it before, you should. But let's not a React library, shouldn't do that. In this demo, where is it? Where's the Angular library documentation? Come on, somewhere here. Where's the Angular lib? I'm sure I had it before. Come on. Okay. This has changed right now.
I'll hop in here. If you go back to the blog post, there's a React one and an Angular one there. So
okay, so let's go to that. Let's just see. I want to generate a new.
Yeah.
Oh, I clicked the wrong one. There we go. That would be why. Perfect. Okay, so I just spun up a new node project, installed a whole lot of dependencies. I mean, you can see these dependencies. Try and do an npm install this fast. There we go. It's already doing Angular stuff. There we go. That's what I'm looking for now. Fantastic. I clicked the wrong link. Okay, so let's add a library. So I will copy that. I'll paste it into this terminal. That is, paste it in and enter. There we go. Let's look at my libs. Oh, there's my lib. If you didn't believe me, let me do another one here. My lib2, because that's an awesome name for a library. I'll run that. There we go. There's my lib2. So it's as if you are developing locally on your own machine. So let's try something else interesting here. Okay. Let's just see. As I said, this is unrehearsed. So let's just ng serve my app. That sounds really great. Let's do that. Yes, I have a my app there in the sample. So in the terminal here, I'll just go ng serve my app. I know that I'm already serving it here, but I thought this is quite impressive to show. So there we go. Would I like to do it on another port? What does that even mean? What ports? Browser page has ports? 57280. So in Stackblitz, we have these previews that you're used to. Now this is that app running there, and you can see it's on port 4200. Now I'll go here, and let's go to port 57280. So whatever I ran there is now running here in another tab. So this is it's kind of like browserception. Okay, there's something going on there. So if I make a change, you'll see the things that you would expect to see. Title, my app. State of Angular. So let's see. Welcome to State of Angular. Let's go to that other browser that I had there. Welcome to State of Angular. So you could be running tests in a separate tab. You could be doing whatever you do locally. Now, it's quite strange because you work in this and it kind of feels like you are working in VS Code on your local machine. You didn't have to install Node. You didn't have to do any of that stuff. It all just works. So it's a really, really incredible experience to use this. Start playing around with it. We have some very, very exciting news coming up soon. Unfortunately, I can't really share some, but yes, just to clarify, all of this code is running browser side. So I would turn off my internet connection to show you, but that would be the end of my presentation. So if I go fully offline, this all works. In the spirit of winging it during a demo, let's just turn the network off because that is awesome. So let's go offline. Perfect. And state of Mark's presentation is in the balance. Okay, yes, that's perfect. So, okay, it did work. That's good. So it works offline. Don't ever wing a demo when presenting to people, but apparently this thing is pretty good and it's pretty stable. So try it out, show it to your friends, maybe not your family, they won't really understand, I don't think. But check it out and keep your ears peeled and your eyes peeled for what's going on with Stackblitz in the potentially the beginning of next year. There's some very, very exciting things coming along. And just lastly, I have been asked to give a quick update on Ngxs because I lead the Ngxs core team. And so Ngxs has been updated to support Angular 13. The next feature has quite a bit in the works. The next minor release has quite a bit in the works in terms of improved typings and various other things have been sorted out there. So if you haven't heard of Ngxs, it's really cool state management library. But I won't wrestle with Brendan right now. So maybe I'll hand over the floor to the next person. Thanks, everyone.
There's enough space for more than one state library, that's for sure.
Definitely.
All right. Well, we are lucky and honored to have Minko and Jessica from the Angular core team here to share some updates on what they're working on.
Sounds great. Well, Jessica, would you want to kick it off?
Certainly. I'll wait till you hit present here. My cat is singing again in the background, so I will let you all enjoy that while we present this morning. So I'm not Minko, I'm Jessica. I stole this presentation. So we'll start talking a little bit about the recent history of Angular. So you can see from this post from Stephen Fluen back in February of 2020 that we were starting to talk about Ivy back then. That was our first kind of announcement. Actually, no, this was when we first landed Ivy support. So, and we just recently officially now got Ivy to be the default like everywhere. So that's very exciting. It's taken a long time to get us there. You can see here we've got some stats, and Minko, I've wanted to ask you about this. Where are my access labels? So this shows differences in performance between baseline NGC and NGC TSC, and you can see the improvements that we've had over the course of our time with Ivy. So it's a pretty marketable difference. Within Google, we just spent a ton of effort making sure Ivy landed. That was a big task of mine over the last year. And we have thousands of applications there. And what we've seen is a giant reduction in computational resources. You can see here 90%. It's huge. It's made a pretty significant difference on our CPU usage. And we've also seen for our largest app within Google, an almost a full hour reduction in build time. So we're saving a lot of developers time and energy because they are not spending so much time sitting waiting for a build. So that's exciting. We also have, come here. This is Scarlett. she wants to say hello. And on top of that, we have some improved debuggability and profiling that has happened with our dev tools that have now been released. And this is developed specifically with Ivy in mind, so it doesn't work with older apps, but it's hugely helpful for helping to debug issues within your application, find out performance issues, and so on. So definitely go use that if you haven't seen it or played with it yet. We've also made a lot of inroads. So this graph here does have a label, at least one. So it doesn't really tell you how long of a time this was, but this was a pretty significantly long amount of time where if you've been paying attention to the Angular repo, you'll have seen our issue count kind of start to balloon up, and same with our pull requests. They got pretty high. We got to almost over 500 pull requests open at one time and almost 3,000 issues open. And through several different projects and efforts over the last couple of years, we've made huge inroads on getting this number reduced. It's an ongoing issue. No pun intended, unfortunately, because, puns are great. And we're continuing to work on these issues and pay attention to them. We are now down to about 140 pull requests open, and we're doing regular check-ins to see what we can close, what's out of date, and so on. So this has been a significant effort for the whole team. On social media, we have had a lot of big inroads there as well. I don't remember the numbers. Is it 40,000 on Twitter, which has been a big thanks to Emma Twersky. If you haven't seen her on any of our presentations, she's doing great work on Twitter. And then Mark Thompson has been doing quite a bit of work on the YouTube side. Did we hit like 100,000 subscribers? Yeah, I think that's the number. And that's really exciting. They've been doing really great work there. So if you're interested in checking out some of the new content, please go take a look. Please give us a like and a subscribe and a follow on the social medias. We also have been changing up our process for comments and interaction with you, all of the folks who are using the framework. We have a new system for our RFCs as well as feature requests that invites comments. We've since posted over 10 RFCs with really good responses and really good interactivity. You can see a few examples of them here on the right side. And there's been quite a bit of comments and interactivity on a lot of our feature requests. So we have a feature request bot now that asks for likes and upvotes. So if you see something that you want in our repo, please go and give it an upvote so we have some sort of signal on what's important to you. And then I'm going to hand it over to Minko. I'm giving his presentation back to him after I have stolen it. So Minko will tell you about what's coming, actually what's new in v13 and what's coming up next. Oh, and Minko, you are not making any noise.
Oh, I was wondering why you're not laughing at the joke that I said in the meantime. So we, in version 13, we pretty much followed up on some of the RFCs that we released over the past couple of months. One of the RFCs, which was one of the most sensitive one on our side, was the proposal for removal of Internet 11 support. Most of the community responded overwhelmingly positive because finally folks will be able to take advantage of features of the web platform such as CSS variables, and they wouldn't have to use polyfills for intersection observers, web animations, proxies, and so on and so forth. So in version 12, we deprecated the Internet 11 support, and in version 13, we dropped it. Another improvement that is particularly impactful on the ecosystem is the update of the Angular package format, which is now entirely Ivy compatible. You no longer need to use ngcc for libraries that are distributed in this package format. Rather than this, we're compiling the libraries to a so-called partial format, where later on we can tweak this partial format and downlevel it to Ivy instructions. We also removed UMD bundles in order to make sure that you don't shoot yourself in the foot by using non-tree shakeable JavaScript files. And we updated the output formats to ES 2020. So with ES 2020 now we're shipping modern syntax where we're downleveling async await so that everything can work properly with zones. If you still need UMD bundles, we have a guide on our documentation that explains how you can make such UMD bundles with Rollup.js for your Angular element or alternative use cases. A couple of other features that we shipped are around Adobe font inlining. So if you're using Adobe fonts, we're going to fetch the font definition and inline it in your index.html file so that your users can have faster load time. We improved the build time with Webpack 5 caching. So based on some metrics that we got around the ecosystem, you can expect build improvements with over 68%. That's the exact number I got. And I've seen on social media some folks who got their builds like reduced 8 times with warm builds. I mean, with caching enabled, with depending on the artifacts that they changed. So make sure you update your Webpack, your Angular CLI dependencies by running ng update to take advantage of this improvement. In the meantime, we also did improvements in the build pipeline where we introduced ES-build as part of the minification step. So when you build your Angular application now, there's going to be passed eventually to ES-build that is going to perform a bunch of mangling and other code optimizations that we're after that going to pass again to Cursor to shrink your bundles even further. But this delegation of part of the build process to ES-build already reduces your build time with about 10%. We also updated our build optimizer, and from a custom implementation, we moved it to a Babel transform, which reduces the build time with another 10%. So version 13 has been big in build time improvements. Make sure you keep up to date with it. We got a couple of we got actually quite a few community contributions, and one of the most impactful in terms of based on the feedback that we got was around enabling and disabling validators in form controls dynamically. And we spent most of this year in improving the accessibility of our components. That was one of the primary focus of our components team. They did an accessibility audit, and after that, improvements of the accessibility of our component kit, and you can find updates about that on Angular.io. So what are we building next? There are actually quite a few things planned. We are going to improve the typings in forms for sure. That is one of the plans that we have for version 14. And this is just a plan yet. It's hard to commit specifically to a date because this is going to be a large-scale change. But just make sure that you're following the Angular Twitter account for updates around the RFC that we're going to share in the next couple of weeks. We're also working on extended analysis of our compiler. The compiler already guarantees to a certain level the correctness of some constructs in your Angular applications by performing type checking, but we want to expand on this. And we want to enable some further conformance checks around performance and security. We're also working on simplifying Angular by removing the factory APIs because they are a view engine concept. And we can just move forward with simpler Angular without necessarily asking you to instantiate a factory when you want to lazy load a component, let's say. Working on better guides in documentation and MDC Web, which will help us have material design components which are even better aligned with the spec and also have some extra accessibility improvements. We'll be kicking off our rollout plan around MDC Web early next year as well. One of the biggest changes that we're anticipating to have to land next year is around standalone components. They're going to have a significant impact on the ecosystem because they would allow you to build Angular applications without necessarily using the ng module concept. This doesn't mean that we're going to completely get rid of ng modules. We are not. They're going to stick around, and we're going to allow them still to be used as a way for you to structure your application or configure your providers, your dependency injection, or declare also the compilation scope of your components. But their importance would drop significantly, and they wouldn't be part of the learning journey. Here's how a component looks like today. And for this hello world component, in order to render it, you'd also need a corresponding Ng module that you're going to bootstrap with the browser platform. And well, we already have to deal with quite a few concepts here. You have the component, which has a template. You have to use the platform browser, and you also have to declare an associated Ng module. With standalone components, this is going to be your whole application. You just have this component, you declare it as a standalone component for now, and you directly bootstrap it using a function that we export from Angular core. None of these APIs is yet completely finalized. We are going to follow up on the RFC for standalone components soon so that we can agree on the format for the declaration of standalone components, directives, and pipes. But from there on, we're going to take it further on declaring, defining, and implementing APIs for bootstrapping components, lazy loading components, and their interactions with the router. These are some of the updates. As a highlight again, next year we'll be heavily working on standalone components, corresponding APIs to improve the ergonomics of the framework further, forms, where we'll be rolling out the initiative that we planned over the past couple of months, and a couple of other surprises that we'll be sharing along the year. And everything will be shared publicly with an associated RFC, just as we have been doing recently, so that we can collect your feedback and we can move the framework together. Thank you so much. That was
Awesome.
Jessica and me.
Thank you both. And Minko, maybe we should just go back and leave that picture up for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere that could really use these kind of vibes right now. But all right. Next up, we have Brandon, who's going to be sharing up a couple different updates with us.
Yep. So this is Nrx and Nx updates. And I'll just say up front, I don't have a fancy demo like Mark, and I'm not going to wrangle with him over Ngxs also, but here we are. So that's okay, which is all fine. But yes, so we'll get into the slides here. I'll give my spiel here because you've seen my face before around the internets. Brandon Roberts, work as a developer advocate at Nrwl, also a Google developer expert, and also a maintainer on the Ngrx project, which we're giving updates about. And you can follow me on Twitter at Brandon T. Roberts, because I have fun there also. So we got a couple of slides here. If you don't know already, Ngrx is a framework for building reactive Angular apps that mostly center around state management. And there, of course, there's that, and there's many other great libraries like Ngxs also. But for updates on the Ngrx side, we just released version 13 pretty recently. And the few highlights from that release are Ivy compiled libraries, as mentioned by Minko and Mark in their presentations there. But like I said, I think I agree with them that this kind of marks a milestone in the Angular development lifecycle as far as Ivy becoming like the only way to build and ship Angular apps, and kind of moving the ecosystem forward in that. So that was, and this also helps us remove some of the Ivy specific checks and things like that. So, and continue to move forward in that way. Ngrx version 13 also adds RxJS 7 support, which we added some support for this in a minor release of Ngrx, but we have full support for that now, either whether you're using RxJS 6 or 7 in Angular, you can still use Ngrx with those in your applications either way there. We also introduced feature creators. So if you're familiar with Ngrx functions or creator functions such as create action, create reducer, and create effect, now we have a create feature that slims down some of the code that you need to do to register a feature for state management with Ngrx store. So definitely some improvements there. I also have improved selectors, and if you use Ngrx selectors before, there's kind of like a limit. Before we were like hand rolling types for up to 8 selectors. for Ngrx selectors, but now we're able to support, an infinite number of selectors there. So definitely improve that support there. And one thing I do want to mention on the like the community side of things is when we also added a page for contributors where if you've contributed to Ngrx at some point, we consider you part of the community now. So we added a page on the Ngrx site so you can see the team, the core team and contributors, and then also community contributors also. And you can find out more about that on the Ngrx side at the blog at blog.ngrx.io, which will redirect you to the particular place. So yeah, those are the Ngrx updates. We're still, like I said, have other ideas of things that we want to bring in the future, and still talking about those things. So we'll have more information about those later. And so we'll move on to the Nx side of things. And if you haven't noticed already, Nx is a smart extensible build framework that helps you build and ship Angular applications using a monorepo, where, as Mark demoed Mark did in the demo, helps you break up your application into small libraries, and also provides a lot of build tooling to help you work more efficiently in that space. So we just released Nx version 13.2, which was from notable release from that was also support for Angular v13. And of course, it's been mentioned here that included some tooling changes. So we definitely had to work with the associated other tooling libraries and authors, including Jest and ESLint and Storybook teams, to integrate those changes into the v13 framework to make sure that users of Angular in a lot of enterprise environments that we support had a good upgrade. And even those who just use Nx in general that want to upgrade, of course, stay on latest and take care of some of those additional tooling ecosystem changes. So we were good to work with those team, and also have talked with the team about making sure we can support that enterprise effort in better ways there. Also, Ngrx v13 was included in this release, and of course, I just mentioned the features that went along with that. Some other things were Nest.js 8 support, and this also kind of brings support for RxJS 7 upgrading to a future RxJS 7 upgrade to Angular projects, because Nest.js 8 requires RxJS 7. So if you're on RxJS 7 already, you have an option to upgrade your repo to RxJS 7 and Nest.js 8. And then in the future, we're looking at upgrading users to RxJS 7 through the migration process, and helping, like I said, smooth out that update process also. And we also have some other recent additions, if you haven't seen it recently, as far as being able to break up your workspace configuration file into, once you break up your project in the libraries, you can also break up your workspace configuration file into many smaller project files, which definitely decreases merge conflicts and other things that you may run into while we're dealing with like larger applications and libraries. And you can check that out at the blog post at blog.nrwl.io also, and it will give you more information about that. And yeah, so those are the updates for Ngrx and Nx.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon.
Yep.
And last for the updates, but certainly not least, James, why don't you take it away?
Yeah. Hey there, everyone. I'm James Daniels, and I'm with Developer Relations on the Firebase team. So probably know me best for my maintenance of the AngularFire library. This is the official Angular library for Firebase support within Angular. So some updates here. Big thing is this has been a multi-year, huge effort across the whole Firebase team. Firebase v9 shipped. that was a complete rewrite. It's the biggest API change in the history of Firebase, including its startup phase, right? This is a huge effort. We redesigned the API to be completely tree shakeable as opposed to, object oriented. So they're pure functions, and AngularFire updated to support this. So we jumped onto that. We have a new pattern in AngularFire in which we are mirroring the Firebase JS SDK API. We're just re-exporting everything and zone wrapping it, making it work a little bit better in Angular. We're adding a couple little things like dependency injection on top of that, but it's a much, much slimmer API that's much more in line with how Firebase works. So you can look at the official Firebase docs, copy the code samples from there, and then just change your imports and maybe use some dependency injection. As part of that, we also supported Angular 13, RxJS 7. Those were in a minor. With AngularFire, we're in the awkward position of having to juggle several different peer dependencies, Angular and Firebase, which have different schedules for their majors. So we're still supporting Angular 12 and RxJS 6 at the moment. So we're juggling those, and that we'll probably do in the next break. So when Angular 14 comes out, we'll probably release the next major of AngularFire and drop support for the older stuff. If you are coming from an existing AngularFire app or a Firebase app, that's a big change, right? So we've actually have a compat API. So both Firebase and AngularFire have a compat import. So if you're using the old school object-oriented or the old AngularFire module imports, you don't have to rewrite your entire code base to get the benefits of V9 and the tree shakeability. These are re-implemented in the compat. It's not as tree shakeable, but you still get a good 30% savings just from the fact that it's ESM now as opposed to UMD and just better stuff there. And once you do make that jump to the full tree shakeable API, you can expect as much as 80% off your bundle size. So that's been a chief complaint with Firebase. Internally now we're using Rxfire. This is just a little bit of an inversion in the relationship. Rxfire is a project Dave and East and I made to take all the Rx stuff that's in AngularFire and make it so that if you're not an Angular developer, if you're just using Firebase and Rx, you can get that benefit. This is a good inversion because we have more people using Rxfire than we have AngularFire, right? We have ReactFire, we have internal use of Rxfire, and that's just making it so that we get those bug fixes faster. We get more eyeballs on that core library and just less duplication. We did make the jump, even in V12, supporting Angular V12. We were one of the first to make the jump to partial compilation mode. So we've dropped view engine support. So we got some benefits there, and long live Ivy. We also added a lot more schematics. So if you've recently done an ng add to a new project, you've noticed it has a lot more going on. It add things to your app module. It gives you different choices with deploy, like you can target apps, you can create Firebase and Google Cloud projects right from that command line experience. So that's really fun. It's really cool stuff. If you haven't used ng deploy yet, try it out. It is magic. Things that we're working on. I mentioned an entirely new API surface, right? We have a lot of work to do here to revamp our docs. A lot of our docs are still pointing towards those compats and the old style. Just moving people over to the new API surface and documenting that. That's a lot of our work that we have to do. We're further increasing those ng deploy capabilities. We did launch the ability to deploy to Cloud Run. Firebase is also doing some improvements here with Google Cloud Functions and that integration. So expect to see more capabilities in ng deploy, better performance, more reliable, deploying other functions alongside things, and just a much more seamless experience here. We're going to do more with our schematics. We added a lot of schematics. We brought in a bunch of schematics code, and we can do a lot more than just ng add with that, right? So we'll explore that, maybe add some generators and things that can get you, off the ground quicker with Firebase. We're also working on the bundling and rehydration, right? SSR is very cool, especially when you combine that with Firestore data bundles, so that when you make the reads on the server, the client doesn't have to read, right? This is with Firestore, with a serverless database, minimizing reads is always a concern because reads cost money. So everyone wants to minimize their reads, and if you're pre-rendering and doing those reads for everyone that comes later on, that's a very good experience for you and your customers. And big thing going on is I've actually been contributing more with Firebase Ui, which is pre-built components for different Firebase things. So it could be a login screen, it could be a table view with pagination. Firebase UI has this, the Android and iOS. We're going to try to aim to be more in parity with those libraries, as well as increase the capabilities and tree shakeability of the current Firebase UI web library. And when we do that, I'd like to actually wrap it and ship it with AngularFire. We just have a little bit of work there to do to make that a library that can ship alongside AngularFire and have a good developer experience. So that's kind of where we're going. Big thing too is just the documentation. That's number one priority right now. So thank you.
Great, thank you. So those that completes our introduction and updates from each of our concerned teams. Now we're going to do a roundtable discussion and Q&A period. So if you have any questions, if any of the viewers here, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions that you would like to ask the panelists, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and we will make sure to ask them to our panelists. Starting us off, we have a question from the community, which is around testing. Now, Brandon, this is specifically around component stores and Ngrx, but I think more broadly for everybody here. So the question was sort of, what advice do you have or strategies for how to best test component stores, and if it's different from other testing strategies for Ngrx? I think for everyone, afterwards, it might be interesting if there are any testing updates, recommendation updates, or any thoughts that you have about philosophy of best testing for each of your libraries. We feel free to jump in, but Brandon, anything particular you wanted to answer for them?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the valuable things about component stores as far as testing goes is you can mock them like you would any other injectable service as far as using component testing them. So I don't think there are anything specific that you need to do there. As far as if you want to test like the internal mechanisms of itself, I would say that if you're using something like if using like the effect method on your component store, and it kind of depends on how you have it set up. But if you're like feeding a stream into, I would say feed your component store effects a stream of data, as opposed to relying on something internally there. So it gives you a little easier window to test there. But for the most part, you can test the component store just by calling the methods on the, once you have it instantiated, by calling the methods on the store itself. And you can also mock some of those streams that are provided on their component store class. So I think those are pretty standard options that you would have for testing there. And that would help out when you're testing it, like say in components, or if you're just trying to test the store itself. Because I don't think you need to do much testing as far as like internal component store code. It's more or less the places where you're maybe wanting to combine some other things with it that you may want to test integration for there.
Is that what you do most typically, Brandon, when you're doing it, or?
Yeah,
or I guess in the projects when you see it.
Yeah, the projects that they've seen it in is you don't, and like I said, that's one of the good things about it is you don't have to. It's similar to like the facade approach, to where you don't have to test the internals of the store itself when you're interacting with the component side of it. So you can mock out what things it provides and the method calls and return your own data there. So yeah.
Ben, I know you get this question a lot too. There are a myriad ways to test RxJS code. Curious if you have any improvements, things that you have coming up in new development, or any improved suggestions on when people ask you, what is the right way to test their RxJS code?
So I think that sometimes people get very excited about like the marble tests, which are really, really good if you're making your own operators. You can test and kind of get an idea of what's going to happen in this pseudo asynchronous space in a way that you can kind of visually see how things line up. Generally speaking, for most people's application code, though, I have personally found it's a lot easier to stub in like a subject or even just an immediate of. Subjects are generally better. I stay away from of because it's synchronous, and people start to think of their what's going on as something synchronous, where subject, it waits for you to next, and then you can assert like what happened before and what happened after. And therefore it's even though your test is synchronous, and within the confines of your test, what's going on is asynchronous. So generally speaking, with your application code, I think it's best to kind of take your inputs and provide for them subjects, and then like next into them, and then update your component and see what the outcome is. For the most part, it becomes easier to reason about when certain things are happening. You can do things with marbles, and you can schedule and fire events with marbles and get really clever with that. But I don't see that as a serious win over just imperatively being, okay, now this happened, now check this. Now this happened, now check this.
Great. And from the Angular side of things, I know there's been talk about the future of Protractor and developments corresponding to that. Any updates on kind of what's going on there, or any thoughts from anybody else on sort of that transition?
Sure, yeah. Currently, we switched from Protractor to a more generic end-to-end testing builder, which offers a couple of community integrations as options. So if you create a project with Angular version 12 or 13 and you run Ngxs, the options that you're going to see are going to be around Cypress and WebDriver IO and a couple of others that have like good community maintenance model, and also are proven as solutions with good developer ergonomics. In the long run, we're going to deprecate Protractor, and this would be the options that people can use to write their end-to-end tests. We worked with these partners in order to introduce support for the Angular CLI for their end-to-end testing platforms. And we're still working closely so that we can guarantee that these plugins, these integrations are stable across releases. Currently, the solutions that we recommend are just solutions that are officially supported by the folks, like the integrations are officially supported by the folks who are developing the end-to-end testing platforms.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure people will be happy to hear about that. So, Mark, one of the questions that we got, and it's not so much a question, I guess, as much as certainly recognizing that 2021 was a great year for Stackblitz in technical achievement. And so the question that was asked was sort of, supporting Nx is obviously amazing. To some extent, the people were just sort of wondering if there was anything that you could do to sort of explain at any level, kind of how you accomplish that. And I guess the parallel question is there anything that you all recognize as being something that you can't support, or do you just take them all as personal challenges as far as, supporting these in the web containers and such?
So I will most likely get in trouble for revealing our secrets, but we have Christmas elves, which they're running inside of a browser, and they sprinkle magic, and that's how it works. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. No, this is my oddball sense of humor. So in terms of what it doesn't support, there's very little that it doesn't support. If something doesn't quite work with your tool or library, that means that you're using potentially some uncommon public API of Node, because essentially we're running Node in the browser, but Node is designed to run on a normal machine. So the restrictions in the browser are quite different. So sometimes we need to be coming up with creative solutions in order to make sure that we can support certain APIs. If your library, there's certain libraries that will never ever run in Web Container, and those are libraries that are doing things that they shouldn't do. So it's essentially reaching outside the sandbox, which is one of the things that we've seen going on in the Node ecosystem with post installs and libraries getting hacked. Is essentially that stuff is running generally in a privileged environment with escalated privileges, and it can do a lot of things on your machine that you probably wouldn't want it to do. So when those things are running within the Stackblitz sandbox in your browser tab, it's very much sandboxed like Stackblitz, like your browser tab should be. So it's safe, and those libraries won't work. So if you are one of those nefarious people with an evil library, I'm sorry, but it won't work. For everyone else, it will work. And there's really awesome plans coming up, which will be announced soon. But essentially, the goal that we're aiming for next year is for this to be your production work tool. So onboarding a new developer, as long as you're working in, for the parts that you're working on your stack, that would be that are kind of these web environment sort of things, JavaScript, TypeScript, things that can be compiled and have a runtime within the browser. You could actually do all of your production work within that environment. A new person joins your team, there's no git install, there's no this, there's no that. You can just get going. So you can essentially work in the browser as you would on the local machine, but a lot safer and a lot quicker too. So I hope that answers the question.
I'm sure they'll be satisfied. Unfortunately, yeah, their attempt to make a Stackblitz clone will we'll have to wait for a little bit more for them. But they were hoping.
You've got to be friends with the Christmas elves. That's the trick, hey?
There you go.
Elf on the shelf. He's not just he does stuff at night.
There we go. Web containers for Elf on the Shelf. You heard it here first. 2022 Stackblitz. Okay. Many of you in your updates talked about libraries getting slimmer. I mean, we've been talking about libraries getting smaller for years. Maybe for some of us that have been around long enough, it maybe feels a little passé to talk about it. But at the same time, this is still critical. We are trying to reduce our bundle sizes, and many of you talked about some of the approaches that you're doing for that. So, James, this question was sort of with respect to Angular Fire and Firebase, talking about the different tree shaking updates that support that you all released. And one of the things that stood out to me and stands out to me looking at the Angular Fire documentation is that it lays out right up front the polyfills that it doesn't support, or that it doesn't package with the package that you have to bring if you need them for the platforms you support. So I guess I have sort of two questions. One for people, for each of the libraries, what are some of the things, if you didn't already cover it, that you're doing to slim down? And secondarily, what are each of your recommendations for people that are using your libraries or just using libraries in general, and maybe now are consuming these different types of bundles for different things that they should be aware of and paying attention to, in their own projects and when they're integrating these libraries?
Yeah, just starting from the Firebase side, a lot of these games are just from, trying to go more functional, right? Functional programming's in. Object-oriented code, it's very hard to tree shake, right? There's side effects within that class. And ultimately, that's where we got all of the gains when we made the new Firebase. Is the old Firebase is very jQuery style, right? Everything's hanging off those objects. You chain them along, and Webpack and ESBuild, they don't know what to do with that, right? They can't dive into those objects very deep and figure out what to shake out. So honestly, I know a lot of people try to fit things into objects. They try to, make abstractions around things and shove as much as they can into individual services and components. Slim them down, make them smaller. They'll be easier to test and they'll be easier to tree shake. And it's a lot of change. It's especially for libraries, right? These are huge baking changes. We always get pushed to make things more object oriented and more chainable. And it's a big one. We had to touch everything in Firebase. Every single API had to change. Every single page of documentation had to be altered. It was a huge effort with dozens and dozens of people involved and a multi-year effort. So yeah, that's the best thing that I can suggest is object oriented. That's really hard to tree shake and slim down.
Great. Anybody else?
I was saying, at least in Ngrx land, we get to take advantage of some of the benefits of leaning on RxJS. So when they is being talked about slimming down the bundle size of RxJS 7, I would say we immediately get those benefits also of slimming down Ngrx libraries that you consume because we're built on top of that. So definitely standing on the shoulders of giants, as they say.
Also, want to mention on the Angular YouTube channel, you can expect a video in the next couple of weeks on building tree shakeable applications and like libraries with Angular. So more details on this are coming soon.
Yeah, I'll jump in here also. I think that when we talk about slimming down, and I think Minko talked about this earlier, like future Angular things like optional Ng module standalone components. I think it provides us an opportunity in Ngrx to kind of slim down some of the APIs that we provide there also, as far as registration of state and things like that. So if we're not having to depend on an Ng module to do that, maybe we can look at providing a slimmer API that's just like provider based to do some of that too. So I think there could be some savings that happens out of that also.
So one thing I'd like to point out though is like, no matter how lean the Angular team or RxJS folks or Ngrx or anybody makes their code, generally speaking, the bulk of your bundle size is going to be your application and other third-party things that you're pulling in that maybe are a little bit less maintained. So, be vigilant about those things. And if you find that your application code is particularly bloated, one thing you can do, and I'm sorry, there's blowers outside my window right now and they just keep going. One thing you can do is try to move your code around, like move declarations closer to where you use them. Look at functions that take a lot of booleans and see if they're actually called with every one of those. Like if you have an abstraction, like a function that takes a bunch of configuration, and then you look and it's really only called 2 different ways, you might be able to remove a lot of branches of code inside of that function and, narrow it down to a function that only does, those 1 or 2 things and kind of break things down into smaller pieces. And you find after such refactors, as long as you've got tests in place to make sure you're not breaking anything, your code can end up being a lot smaller. So a lot of it's on you folks that are listening and not just people here trying to make this stuff smaller. We're doing our best, but it's important.
I'd add too that, smaller doesn't necessarily mean better performance, right? You can reduce your bundle size, but is that actually improving your metrics, especially when you're doing async stuff, reaching out? I think, you can be really smart around pre-rendering, a combination of pre-rendering, state transfer, and lazy loading, right? You can pull in libraries on demand. Like, I as a library author can't do it out of box, right? Like if you're using Firestore, I can't lazy load Firestore for you. I can't both be tree shakeable and lazy load. I can choose one or the other, right? But you, the developer, using my library, can choose to lazy load it. And you could do pre-render, do a state transfer, you have content, then lazy load Firestore and make it real time. And that will both shave down your bundle size and make your performance better, much more than, me tree shaking the hell out of Firestore will do for you. So, be smart about that. Look at your core metrics. You can chase your bundle size down as low as it'll go, but that doesn't necessarily mean your core vitals will be any better. So keep an eye on those and track them.
Great. One of the questions that we got was about standalone modules or standalone components, excuse me. And the question was around a pattern which has become fairly popular in the community called single component Angular modules. And the question is basically, is this the same thing? And if not, how are they different, or are they to tackle different problems? Is there anybody, maybe Minko, that could kind of explain that?
Yeah, they're different in a way that you don't need modules when you have standalone components. With the single components, the scan pattern, you need a module there so that you can declare your compilation context and eventually your providers. So that's the biggest difference. As a beginner, you don't really have to think about modules at all. In terms of compatibility, they're pretty similar. You can easily migrate a scam module to a standalone component. There could be even, the transformation could be even automated. So if your application entirely consists of this pattern, like if you're using it throughout your whole application, there could be eventually a transformation that moves your ng modules to standalone components, pipes and directives without any manual intervention on your side. Another I guess benefit would be around lazy loading components, something that can't really be achieved the same way that it would be achieved with standalone components, right? In the future, is lazy loading individual components. Currently, you need to provide the compilation context for the component once you lazy load it. Not the compilation context, but like what is currently available in this component that needs to be rendered on the screen. And this use case will be way simpler with standalone components. Yeah.
Great. Well, since we're on the topic of standalone components, is there one of the questions that that people kind of have is what is the projected impact for users of the libraries with access to this pattern? Is this going to be something that is going to be unavailable if people are using Ngrx or Rxfire or similar things? Or I guess conversely, are there any questions that you all have, since we have Minko here, about support for your individual libraries?
Are you going to break Ngrx? No. Go ahead, Minko.
No, it's going to be an additive change, so we're not going to break anything. I was thinking we can even release it theoretically in a minor version, because we're just adding an extra property for the metadata for directives, for the configuration object of directive pipes and components. For component, and if you want to be consuming Ngrx the same way, or Ngxs with just importing, or Rxfire with just importing the corresponding like module within your ng module, you can still do that even after we release standalone components. Or alternatively, you would be able to import it in your component metadata directly, so that you can like save this in direction a little, like make the make it less transitive, like let's reduce the steps, bring your dependencies closer to your components. Just something that's Ben mentioned recently, actually, just like 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, maybe I could add something onto into the mix in terms of SCAM and standalone components. I am super excited about it, and maybe just a word to the community. If you haven't tried SCAM components, or if you haven't heard of standalone components, start to read up about it, because I think it really transforms the way that you build your Angular application. I started using, basically, it's now called SCAM approach, but I started doing it in about 2017, I think it was, just because it became an obvious pattern. Because in your components, your dependencies are your component dependencies onto other components. It essentially implicit in the HTML of your component. So all those dependencies would be declared right in your app module, and it was difficult to deal with that. You had to kind of redeclare those dependencies again when you did your tests. If you imported your app module, your tests would get slower and slower and slower as your app got larger. So in essence, you're declaring those dependencies of a component right with the component and making it very explicit. And in doing that, we've spoken about tree shakeability. It becomes very obvious when things are not used, because you explicitly essentially importing components and modules at the place that they're needed, and not just at a global place where you're not quite sure what will break if you move it. So it's very clear who is using what, and to explore your app in that way. So I highly recommend looking into the approach. It will improve the way that you build your app, but that's just my opinion.
I'm just going to add here that I believe the RFC is still out there. You can go take a look at it, and please do. Please go look through the proposed implementation and see if you can break it, because that's important for us to understand whether we're doing it correctly. And this is certainly not a scam. Definitely go take a look.
Yeah, it's unfortunate when someone has a really, really clever acronym, and then you always have to say it's a great pattern. It's not actually a scam, but it is nevertheless. This is sort of a fun question, and to some, it's also a celebration of the Angular community for being true TypeScript hipsters, of having done TypeScript before it was cool, now that everybody uses it. And Ben, you gave some updates on some of the type changes that you're making. Brandon, you did as well. And sort of I guess on some level, the practical version of the question is just, what kind of type changes and philosophies or approaches are any of you looking for your libraries in the future? But also, be honest, come on, who is your type wizard that's writing all those crazy types? Because that's something that we hear a lot, is people look at some of the types in these libraries and they're like, how do they come up with this? So I don't know if you want to share any pain points with solving your TypeScript problems, but feel free.
Nicholas Jamieson did, I did some of it, but he's amazing at it. And then also, some of it I would ping Alex Rickabaugh sometimes, who's on the Angular team, Rado Kirov, who used to be on the TypeScript team next to the Angular team and is now at Stripe.
We read type theory papers with Rado, so he's really into that.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. On our team, it's Alex Akrishko. There are multiple type, I will call them type nerds. They will probably gladly accept that. Alex Akrishko, Tim DeShriver, Marco is another one. We also have some community contributors also. David, the one that comes to mind, his name's David Shortman, who contributed a lot to the selector types in the latest version of Ngrx. So they really dig into those. They've built out a really good infrastructure around the types and testing that we're asserting against the right thing. So a lot of that stuff is, beyond my mental capacity. So I definitely lean on them for the advanced type stuff.
My mic cut out before I said Moshe Kolodny also, and I didn't want him to watch this and be like, but yeah, totally. I'm leaning on much smarter people than me for a good chunk of that.
Yeah, something I'll just mention is somewhere that I've lent on recently that is an incredible resource is literally tech Twitter. I put out a tweet the other day, and I just said, I have a very difficult TypeScript problem. It's broken my head for 2 years now. Can anyone help? And literally within a day, we had a solution. And we had many really smart people. None of us would know their names, but there are some people that really know TypeScript really well. So don't hesitate to reach out and ask the community to help. Our covariance, contravariance, and inferring T from the return type is some stuff that I had to do I didn't think it was possible, and now I know it's possible, and it's landing in the state operators of Ngxs soon. So that is a big win, because that particular API was broken with the release of TypeScript 3.1, and I've been silently grieving ever since, and now I've discovered that it is actually possible with some TypeScript voodoo. So
Honestly, I just look at other people's libraries. I open their index DTS, like, every time I'm coding in something, I'm like, how did they type this so well? This is very dynamic. How is this typed? Every time I'm surprised, I go ahead, I open the index DTS, poke around, see how they did that, get very confused, and then cross-reference it with the TypeScript docs and just cross my fingers that I am on a high enough version of TypeScript to be able to use that same concept.
Well, the community appreciates the hard work. It makes our lives a little easier. For anybody else that's listening, TypeScript isn't that scary, but some of the work that the library authors do can get that scary sometimes, and we appreciate that they have contributors that can do that. But I do have to agree with you, Mark. I will say that one of the things which is the funniest thing to see is when you have a bunch of TypeScript or just typed language developers, and someone has a particularly difficult type that they're trying to form together. You throw that in, and it's like throwing chum into a bunch of sharks. Like the thread suddenly explodes with different theories on how it might work, and suddenly different sandboxes are being thrown around, and we love nerd sniping each other with type questions. All right, well, the conversation is going to wrap up here soon. We're already almost to the end of our time, so I thought maybe as conclusion we'll go around, and because we are doing this, we are taping this and doing this live at the end of the year. We are in a holiday season, so what is very trendy to do at the end of the year can either be predictions or resolutions or some sort of holiday wish list. So I will leave it up to any of you if you want to give a prediction for 2022, a wish list for what you would wish that the Angular community or the Angular platform will give us in 2022, or a prediction if you want to put your foot down here so that next year when we do this, you can proudly say how correct you were, because it'll be on tape. So we'll go around. Why don't we start with Ben?
Oh boy. I mean, predictions, I don't know. I foresee a whole new world of like edge rendering and all sorts of really interesting things that are coming out. I don't know specifically what Angular is working on in to that regard, but I think that the landscape is definitely shifting currently, and I'm really, really excited about the staff changes on the Angular team. I think it's going to bring some fresh perspective and some new direction. There was a long slog through Ivy. I think, having spent part of my life doing that for sure, and I think that there's a lot of really interesting things that we'll probably see in the roadmap because of different ideas and different leadership. So I'm excited about that for Angular for sure.
Awesome. Mark?
Yeah, let me just look into my golden ball here. No, that's a lot, Lob. So for the future, I think the future is very bright for next year. Definitely for Angular, with the moves that have been made towards Ivy, with the new compilation format, seeing a bit more of the kind of intimate areas of that stuff. That is this. I think Angular is just getting started, embracing ESM, moving the whole ecosystem forward. I think this stuff, it was really uncomfortable. Ask me about my last month and a half, but I think it is really, really good. So I think next year is going to be a really good year for Angular. I think it's going to be a good year for Stackblitz, especially the web container stuff is going to, it's going to blow up with what's coming. And also, I can give a prediction and a guarantee. I think, 2022 is definitely going to be better than 2020. So I'll leave it at that.
I hope you knocked on wood or grabbed a rabbit's foot or whatever anti sort of curse mechanism you have there. But but okay, we'll take that prediction.
I held on to my optimism.
Also, pretty low bar.
That's why it's scary. So, Brandon.
Yeah. I will piggyback on predictions for next year. I predict that Angular will be better in 2022, and Angular will continue to move forward. So that's something that I'm excited about, because I think, just talking about Nx and Angular, and I predict that, well, maybe this is a prediction, but I'll say prediction or wish list. We'll say either way. I think that we will have better integration with Angular and better conversations and collaborations in that area. So that's a prediction or wish list that I put out there. And I will also say that on one of my wish list items for next year is for file-based routing in Angular. So we'll see if it happens, if through the community efforts or some kind of third-party library or something like that. It's on my wish list, and we'll see if we can make that happen. And of course, I'm always optimistic about Ngrx and continue to move the state management ecosystem of libraries forward. So we'll definitely keep trucking on that too.
Great. Jessica?
Awesome. So I'll put my holiday glasses on here. I will make some predictions that are a bit of a cop-out because there's a lot going on that I can't talk about. But what I will say is version 14 and 15 will get released. And that my hope is that it'll be a fun year and that we get to work on fun stuff. That's all I got.
Great. The glasses was really all we needed, so the rest was just the cherry on top. Minko?
Yeah, +1 on Jessica set, version 14 and 15. I think that's a good prediction. Also, standalone components and type forms. This is something that will bring improvements to in 2022. I would not commit to other things, but there are other exciting things coming as well. That is just a teaser.
Yeah, there's a lot of teasers on this one. Maybe that'll be the new holiday tradition. End of the year teasers. Reason to come back from the holiday break. All right, and James?
The best predictions are the ones that you're involved in making true, right? So I have a resolution as well as some predictions. So my resolution, we've been on the Firebase team super heads down on engineering, getting this new major release out, docs and everything. My resolution in this next year is to talk to the community more, interact with them. It's something that us in DevRel positions and customer-facing positions, it's been rough, all of COVID. And, I'm resolving this year to work with the community more, talk to more people, and, do more advocacy and documentation work. That's my big resolution. We'll see if the pandemic environment lets us interact in person more. As for predictions, I think in this upcoming year and the years following is we're gonna run into more of the case where we have server-side rendering, we have compute at edge happening, we have it's building this future where there's going to be a spectrum of compute where your app gets steadily rendered and more pieces added from the server or pre-render step, right, from your computer as a developer, all the way to the browser. And there's going to be pieces added and dynamic stuff added as it gets closer and closer to the end consumer. And that's going to be good for performance. But there's going to be a class of developers, right, that this is all new to. We're already seeing this where, we hide it under being isomorphic and, developers don't understand that they're targeting Node, right? They're just building their app. Why, is this dependency blowing up in their face? And for us as library and framework authors, this is the challenge of how do we empower developers that know what they're getting into, And how do we make a seamless isomorphic experience where, junior developers who don't know what they're building for, they're just building their app. How do we make it just work for them? And that's the tightrope that we'll have to walk.
Great.
So I will just throw in one commitment there. Just I will be committing in the new year to be releasing a library that's been in the works for literally about 4 years. It's been in production use for a year, but it's not in the public, and I think it's going to blow your socks off. It is around state management. It is around kind of more localized state management, but you'll have to have a look what's coming. Really, really simple. Same sort of philosophy as in Ngxs, where it's simple to use, it feels natural, and it doesn't feel like state management. So that's my commitment, to actually release it and not just talk about it.
Awesome.
It's about time. No.
Great. Well, my prediction is that we will probably do this again in another 6 months. And I think all of us should make a resolution to be there when that happens. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you so much to our panelists for sharing all of your updates today. Thank you, of course, to this.labs and the Angular team for sponsoring and putting this all together. And of course, thank you to those of you that are here, and thank you to everyone in the Angular community for giving us a reason to have these conversations and to build these libraries. So we are excited to see what everybody will do in the next year, and we will hopefully see you there to talk about it. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
See ya.
Bye.